Hi everyone, welcome to the first StrapiConf. We are super excited to have you here today. Here are some numbers about the conference: 30 talks and workshops, 5,000 attendees and 19 sponsors. Thank you to the speakers for the amazing talks they are going to share today. The speakers panel clearly showcases how Strapi grew from a small project to a key part of company stacks across all industries. Thank you to our sponsors for their support and contribution in making this event a success. It is truly exciting to build the future of the web together with such a vibrant ecosystem. The event is split into 3 tracks. In the Adopt track, you will discover the benefits of using Strapi through exciting case studies. In the Build track, the community will showcase how innovative companies are building world-class Jamstack architectures and sharing best practices for Strapi-powered applications. In the Integrate track, you will learn how Strapi can be integrated with other technologies to push the boundaries of the modern web and e-commerce. No matter if you're a Strapi expert or just heard about it, you will learn a lot today. Some of you have probably noticed that the StrapiConf website and event platform look familiar. And that's because in order to provide a unique experience for the StrapiConf attendees, we decided to use the virtual event starter kit built by the Vercel team for Next.js Conf. This is powered by Strapi. We are very serious about dogfooding our product from the Strapi.io website to the way we manage the Strapi Enterprise Edition license server. So the decision to use Strapi for our first user conference was quite natural. I'm happy to announce that this virtual event starter is available as an open source Strapi template on GitHub. We are using Discord as our official interaction platform for speaker Q&A, sponsor booth, and giveaways. If you have not already, please join the conversation there to network with the Strapi team, sponsors, and members of the community. In the interest of fostering an open and welcoming environment for all attendees, we are committed to making this event inclusive and harassment-free. Please make sure to follow the guidelines included in our code of conduct. I also invite you to share your feedback, questions, and favorite moments on Twitter with the StrapiConf hashtag. Thank you so much for being here today. It's gonna be an amazing moment together. Today, I'm gonna tell you a story. The story of Strapi. 6 years ago, Aurelien, Jim, and I were students. To make money, we worked as freelance developers. We made many websites using traditional CMSs. But when we had to do a mobile application or wanted to use a modern front-end framework, it was Angular 1 at the time, traditional CMSs were not a good fit. We needed something that was API-based. Also, as JavaScript developers, we wanted our CMS to be customizable with the same programming language. Frustrated by the available solutions, we decided to create our own piece of software. We started using it for our clients' projects, and then we actually realized that thousands of people were having similar needs. So we decided to make the project available for everyone. The first option, which was probably the easiest, was to build proprietary software through a SaaS offering. But the reality is that we were heavy users of open source traditional CMSs. For us, it was the only way as developers to keep control over our stack, host the data on our own servers while customizing the CMS according to our needs. It was also a great opportunity to give back to the open source communities we were part of. For us, it was a no-brainer. Any CMS had to be open source. So we released the project on GitHub under the MIT license on the 1st of October 2015. Strapi was born. Until the end of our studies, we maintained the project as much as we could, spending our nights, weekends, and holidays on it. We worked as a small web agency to keep improving the product while using it in production. And we finally switched full-time on the project in mid-2017. This is when we introduced the V3 of Strapi with a brand new React admin panel and the initial plugin system. That was the real beginning of the story. In 2018, we added key features such as file upload, rich text editor, and Graphql. We started our first fundraising workshop, which was extremely hard. We finally closed it with a negative amount of $30,000 on our bank account. It could have been the end of Strapi. But since then, everything accelerated. In 2019, we released a component library named Buffet.js. That way, anyone could develop plugins using the same design system. Building a huge ecosystem of plugins has always been part of our vision. We introduced the dynamic zones and components, which made Strapi the most flexible CMS. In 2020, major improvements have been added to make Strapi even more professional. The media library, the stable version, role-based access control, draft and publish, just to name a few. Within a few years, Strapi grew from 0 to 3 million downloads, 35,000 stars on GitHub, 650 contributors, 250,000 lines of code, 15,000 commits, and 250 plugins available on NPM. All of these achievements wouldn't have been possible without the amazing Strapi community. Thank you so much for being part of this journey. The community has never been as active and enthusiastic as now. Thank you to the early adopters who always encouraged us to make Strapi better. Your feedback has been extremely valuable. Each of your positive messages have been heard and appreciated. Today, I'd like to make a special shout out to the top contributors, especially the community stars, for their commitment. Huge thank you to the Strapi team, who is doing an amazing job every day to make Strapi as great as it is today. I am extremely proud of our team. Thank you to the underlying techs that Strapi is based on. We wouldn't be there without these technologies. So today, we decided to allocate a budget to support these projects. This budget will be split across Storybook, Webpack, and Bubble. Strapi is now used by tens of thousands of freelancers, startups, web agencies, and many of the biggest companies all over the world. As you may know, Strapi is available through both a Community Edition and an Enterprise Edition. The Enterprise Edition is an extension of the Community Edition. It includes custom roles for admin users, single sign-on, and support. Thank you to our customers for making the project a bit more sustainable day after day and helping us making Strapi production ready for large-scale implementation and challenging use cases. Thank you to the universities and nonprofits for being part of the Free Enterprise Edition program. We are glad to help you make the world a better place. Thank you to our investors for supporting the project and being very well aligned with our vision. Last but not least, thank you to all of our solution partners for making Strapi their de facto CMS. Again, thank you everyone for being part of this journey. And I have good news for you today. This is only the beginning. The CMS market drastically changed over the past decades. Everything started with static websites. When the web started, it was the only way to create web pages, but updating content was very complex for non-technical people. This is a reason why traditional CMSs have been created a few years later. Then smartphones and other devices appeared. The content had not only to be displayed on websites, but also on mobile applications, IoT, and other devices. Even the way to create a website really changed. Developers want to use modern front-end frameworks. Headless CMSs solved all of this issue through an API-first approach. And the future is about no-code, low-code, thanks to connected services. The reason why we wake up every morning is to fuel the world's creativity and productivity by unleashing the power of atomic content. Over the next few years, we plan to double down on what makes Strapi so unique. Open source, customization capabilities, and a large ecosystem of plugins and partners. To do so, we'll prioritize around 3 main axes: create, connect, and collaborate. Create is all about the website or application building phase. Most of the time, headless CMSs are configured by developers. We've been in their shoes, so we know what it is. We want to offer the best developer experience in the market. We want to make your life easier. We want you to have fun. For all of these reasons, we will focus on API tokens, SDKs, custom fields, TypeScript support, first-class documentation, and even a hosted version of Strapi. Connect is about the ecosystem. What made the success of traditional CMSs are the ecosystems of plugins they've built around them. It's gonna be the exact same story for headless CMSs. Actually, it will be even more relevant since everything is about APIs. We strongly believe in integrations with other technologies. The assets have to be stored in different locations. The content has to be synchronized with search engines. The CMS has to be connected with e-commerce solutions. Also, we think the content will be at the heart of the entire experience. That's why we believe it should be integrated with tools like Sketch and Figma. That way designers can work with real content added by editors. After this, developers can use the same content by connecting their front end to the CMS. No code is a fantastic trend. Strapi will be part of this movement. In the future, we'll provide a marketplace so everyone can share extensions or download high-quality, secured, and certified plugins. Collaborate is about the editing experience. At the end of the day, CMSs are mostly useful for marketing teams. Thanks to CMSs, content editors can update websites and applications without reaching out to programmers. CMSs are often great for developers, but not for marketers, or the opposite. We want to make Strapi great, both for technical and non-technical people. We believe in a CMS with a smooth, comfortable, and easy editing experience, where editors can work together. You, as users, suggested tons of ideas that will come in the future. Previews, versioning, comments, reviews, rich text editor with links, content migration across environments, import, export, real-time editing, audit logs, a responsive dashboard, a mobile application, a desktop application, and even content powered by artificial intelligence. All of the things will take time. In any case, this is where we're going together. So, if you believe in this vision and want to be part of this journey, post a message on Discord and stay connected for the amazing announcements that Aurelien, Alex, and Jim are going to make now. I wish you an excellent conference.
Thank you, Pierre, and welcome everyone. I'm thrilled to be part of such an amazing project and community. First of all, I would like to renew our commitment to open source. Strapi is an open source project, and we deeply believe in the values attached to it. Being open source is a spirit, a philosophy. It's about freedom, transparency, free speech, and privacy. In these difficult times, we all know how important those values are. So, thank you for your support in the journey by contributing, promoting, and using Strapi each day. Today, I wanted to talk about an hidden feature within Strapi. Something that we use on a daily basis without knowing how powerful it is. If you already use Strapi, you will probably know the dynamic zones and components, but the true concept behind is the atomic content. Atomic content is the new design system. If you are not familiar with the atomic content approach, let me explain it to you. An atomic content approach is when we break down a content structure, like the home page of a website, for example, into smaller pieces of content that can be reused anywhere, on another page, on another project. Let's take a look at the home page of the Strapi.io website and analyze its content model. We can see that we have 3 buttons. In terms of content structure, the needs are the same: a link, a label, and a background color. In Strapi, we call this a component, a small content structure that we reuse in different places on the page, or on another page, or on another application. If I scroll down on the same page, we can find a more interesting content structure. We call it the feature component. Each feature component has 3 fields. The media fields to manage the icon on the left, and 2 other fields to manage the title and the description. Again, they all share the same content structure. The cool thing is that if I go on another page, we can find again the same feature component. Visually speaking, it looks a bit different, but the content structure is the same. This is the perfect example of having an atomic content approach. We can reuse content components wherever we need them and display them differently. Because, in reality, digital projects often have similar needs. The content structure are almost identical. From buttons to links or feature list or menu or footer, it's always the same, and the front-end engineers and designers understood it years ago with the front-end components in React or Vue and the design system. If we continue our parallel with the design system, we can compare the CMS terms in Strapi with the one used in the design system. For instance, the fields are the atoms, the components are the molecules, the dynamic zones, as we call them at Strapi, are the organism, and finally, the content types are the pages or templates. In fact, the real power is in the system and the implementation. Because when you make a change in a field which is part of a component, the change is available everywhere, instantly, in every single dynamic zones and content types using the component. It makes the whole content structure super flexible, highly maintainable, easily reusable, and very consistent. According to our users and customers, Strapi is the best CMS if you want to have an atomic content approach for your next project. We have seen many projects capable of maintaining content structure at scale, and digital agencies reusing components across different projects by copying, pasting the components file from a project to another. Let me show you in a short demo how easy it is to create components in Strapi and reuse them in another project.
So for the sake of this demo, I have already created 2 projects. The project A is going to be a blog, while project B a corporate website. The goal is to share a Strapi component from project B to project A. So let's start by running both servers and see what we have already built. So I use the yarn develop command to launch the servers. They are running on 2 different ports for this demo. Let's open the browser and see project A. We already have an articles collection type with a very simple content structure, title, a cover, and a content dynamic zone. In project B, we already have some pages, like the home page. If I go in the content type builder, we can see the structure is very simple, title and dynamic zone called body, and we have an interesting component because there is a repeatable component within another component. What I want is to add a new component, so I create a new component called button, and in a new category called shared. Then I will have 3 fields. The first one is going to be the label, so this is a short text, and the second one a link, it's a short text, and the third field will be is going to be a media field for managing an icon, for example. Then I save, server restart, I go back in my pages collection type and I add the new freshly created component button. So we can find, you can see the button component is in the dynamic zone. I save and that's it. If I go back in the content manager, I can contribute this new and use this new component. I click on button, then I add the label, register to newsletter. I add the link, strapi.io/register, and a very cool icon for this button. I save and So let's dig a bit deeper and analyze what happened on my machine. So in each project we have a components folder, and in project B we can see there is another folder called shared with the button.json component in it. So let's open this component in VS Code, and we can see there are three fields, the fields we just defined with the validation and type for each field. What will happen if I copy this folder from project B to project A? So let's just try it. So I just copy the folder there, and in VS Code we can see that we now have the share folder and with the same component, the button. So the server already restarted, so we just need to go back in the browser and refresh the page, the administration. We can see that the share category is here with the button component, which is really cool. I add this component in my dynamic zone. So the button is here in my dynamic zone, and I save. So go back into content manager. We are in the project A, and I will add and use that component to also create a register to newsletter button. And I'm not going to add an icon from this one because all the fields are optional. There is no required validation for this component. I save and that's it. So to conclude, by storing all the content structure into files, it makes the components easily exportable and shareable between projects. It's a very powerful and hidden feature in Strapi, especially for digital agency when you are creating a lot of new projects per year.
Finally, this demo leads me to this idea to create a community platform to share dynamic components between each other as a community. It will be easier to get started by reusing pre-built components. It will advocate best practices, avoid mistakes, and make the content modeling way faster. We also could imagine a public and private collection of components for personal use only. What do you think about this idea? I would love to have all your feedback and insight. Feel free to react in the chat, on Twitter, on our forum.strapi.io. Today, it's just an idea. We like to measure the interest and know how useful it could be for you and us as a community. Before making some exciting announcement, I thought it would be interesting to clarify differences between traditional and headless CMSs, because headless is the new normal. There is no more differences between what we call the traditional and headless CMS. Every single CMS is moving to headless, if it is not already one. I think we could just admit that the headless CMS are not different. They are just the new cool kids in town and the next generation of CMS. However, they haven't been built to solve the same problem. At Strapi, we imagine the future of the CMS as a single source of truth for your content. We aim to believe in a future when the content is dispatched across designer, developers, and content editor tools to keep the content synchronized between each other. From Figma to Sketch, or Vue and React, or DeepL and crowding, all those tools have a lot in common. They share the same source of content. And our vision is that this source of content is going to be the CMS. It's now time to make some announcement. In order to pursue our mission to empower millions of people to manage content, it was important to continue our effort to provide the best content editing experience. One important thing was missing in Strapi, the ability to translate content. As an international project and community, it was crucial to enable each one of you to translate your content in multiple languages. It's not possible. Let's watch it together. I'm very excited to announce the release of the internationalization feature. It's 100% open source under a MIT license. It's free, unlimited, you can translate your content in all the locales and languages without any limitations and restrictions. The team focuses the efforts on the productivity aspect by keeping the existing user flow. You can easily copy your content from a locale to another. It's perfectly integrated with the existing draft and publish functionality and the current permission system. We also study all the use cases. For example, we know that sometimes the content structure can be a bit different according to the language. This use case is perfectly handled by the dynamics and the components with the internationalization feature. The feature is provided through a plugin and installed by default in each new project. It's available today, so give it a try. When we started to design this feature, we knew that it would be a plugin. We want to keep the core of Strapi as lightweight as possible. However, the development of the internationalization feature pushed the limits of our existing system to easily integrate external plugins in the current interface and the core of Strapi. As you know, our goal is to build a software where everyone can participate by customizing the administration panel, creating new plugins like we did, enhancing existing functionalities, and makes the migration easier between versions. In order to build a successful future, it requires consistency and harmony. At Strapi, we want to offer the best experience for developers and content editors. And we have to admit that currently we are not reaching our ambitions. Today, we wanted to share with you a sneak peek of what the future of Strapi will look like. We call it the V4. It's a brand new version of Strapi, including a free and open source design system to build beautiful and consistent plugins. I hope you appreciated the video. The V4 isn't available yet. We expect a beta version available this summer. This new version will enable us to develop new very asked features, such as content versioning, workflow, custom fields, revision history, import, export data, and more, way faster than we are able to do today. I'm going to hand it back to Alexandre, who will talk about the V4 from an engineering perspective. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Aurelien. So let's have a look at what's coming in V4 then. So in V4, our mission is to enable the feature development and also to improve the developer experience with our three main components. So we have the core framework that enables building new plugins and new applications. We've got the admin panel that will contain all the content management features, such as versioning, collaboration workflow, or even the publication workflow. And the third component is the plugins in general. So it's the whole ecosystem of plugins, the ones that Strapi maintains, but also the ones that you create and that contribute to building a great community. So we want to improve those three components, and to do that, we will need new foundations. So those foundations will rest on four pillars, which are the core API, the content structuring and database layer, the content API, and finally the plugin API. So we'll have a look at those four pillars right now, and we'll start with the core API. So the core API is basically our framework. We need to build a strong framework that will be stable and robust to be able to build the new features and improve the developer experience. And for that, the first thing that we're going to do is work a lot of the internal code at Strapi. So we have got internal APIs, we've got internal loaders, stuff like that, and we want to improve them to make Strapi more robust and faster. So that's the first point. Another very important point is the error handling system. We want to make sure that the errors are handled from the DB layer to the admin panel, and that the experience of our developers and of you is going to get better, and you will know what is wrong and how to fix it. And finally, what we want to improve in the core API is to expose new stable programmatic APIs for you to use and for the maintainers to use to create new features. So for example, we are going to create a command API to add new commands to the CLI, or we are going to create a menu API to add menu items in the admin panel. So let's continue with the content structuring and database layer. So this one is the most important one, I think, for the new features that will be coming in the few next months, because it's the one that will enable creating the versioning, the collaboration, and the publication workflows, which are really important to us. So the first thing that we are going to do on the DB and the content structuring layers is to rework the way we do our database schema to make sure that we can support those new upcoming features in the next months. Once that's done, we are going to have to consume that new format and that new database schema. So we are going to expose a new query engine that will be able to create the new schema, and we allow you to create plugins or also to create your own applications with Strapi. So it has like three really important and cool goals. It's enable the maintainers to create the new features that we want, and also you to create great stuff. And the third point that we are going to work on the DB layer is the way we migrate the schemas. So there are two important points on the migration. The first one is how do you upgrade Strapi from one version to the other. So if we need to change the core schema, we have to have the great migration system for you to just have a seamless upgrade. But there is also another goal, that is migrating from one environment to another. So for example, your dev environment to your production environment. We're going to work on how we can make the migration story a lot better for you. So that's cool. Now we have new database schema, we have great features in the DB, but how are you going to use it then? Well, the first thing is we need to expose those new schemas to the content API. So in the content API, we have two parts, the REST API and the Graphql API, and we will give some love to both of them. So let's have a look at the REST API first. So the REST API, the first thing that we are going to do is standardize the response and request formats to make sure that there is something that's really flexible for us to add the new features without breaking the APIs. And it will be also a good base to create new SDKs from. We also want to add new great features that you have been requesting for a while now. So we will add paginated responses. We'll also rework the way we do the filtering, so you have a better API, and you can also use tools to auto-generate some code, for example. And two great features that have been really requested and that are really cool, I think, are the selection of fields and the selection of relations. So you will be able to control what fields you really want to fetch, and also avoid performance issues by avoiding to fetch all the relations when you don't need them. On the GraphQL side, we also have some stuff very important to do. So same as with REST, we are going to add the pagination and also the new filtering system. We want to make them really consistent between the REST and the GraphQL API. But we also are going to add new things. The main one is really rework the way the schema is built in GraphQL to have better standards and respect more of the best practices of the industry. So better required fields, better checks on the inputs, and also the input format in itself will be reworked. And kind of cool thing is we are really going to focus on how the performance of GraphQL can be improved because it has been a pain point for a while now, and we really want to make that better. The fourth pillar, which is not the least important, is the plugin API. So that's cool, we've got great features, we've got a new DB format, we've got content APIs that are flexible enough to create the new features, but now it's up to you to create new great features for the rest of the community and for your own needs. And for that, we are going to rework the way the plugins can be created. The first point is we are going to introduce a programmatic API to create plugins. So you will be able to create plugins in a more flexible and more stable way. The second point is we are going to expose the core APIs I mentioned earlier, so the command API or the menu API, so the plugins can interact with those APIs and you will be able to expose like a command for your plugin. And the third part of the plugin API, which is maybe the most important part in my opinion, is the way we are doing the extensions of plugin right now. Is really difficult to maintain because every time you upgrade your Strapi application, you have to also upgrade your extensions. So we will try to replace that in the upcoming features and in the upcoming releases throughout the V4 to transform the system from a simple overwrite of files to a hook and observability system where you can just plug your code where you want and only extend the specific features. This will make your plugins a lot more stable and maintainable in the longer term. So I'm about done with all the pillars, and there is just one very important thing I want to say. It's only the beginning of the V4, of course. We have a lot of other ideas we want to explore and we want to release, but the goal is really to make a first MVP release of the V4 so we can start building on top of it. It's really just a stepping stone, and we will need you and your feedback to make it really better. So I will introduce Jim now to talk about the user success team.
Hello everyone, and thanks for the introduction. Well, I'm Jim Laurie, co-founder and Chief User Success Officer at Strapi. Today, I will give you a quick overview of our internal organization and the resources we provide to help Strapi users to be successful at every step of their journey. To achieve this mission, we regrouped under the same department every domain, job that is going in that direction. The mission, the goal of the user success department is simple: set Strapi users up for success, making sure to provide resources that are helping users free and paid. We define the user success department with 4 pillars that are crucial for this mission. The documentation. We have technical writers that focus their efforts on providing the best developer and user guide documentation to make sure that everything is documented, well presented, easily understandable and searchable. The documentation is the second most important touchpoint that users have with Strapi, just after the product itself. so it's really critical to invest energy into the documentation. Massive work on the documentation is currently in progress. Feel free to help us improving it by submitting issues on the documentation repository. The support. On a daily basis, there are tons of technical questions coming from the community and from customers. To manage that flow of activity, we organize everything to be able to scale properly the service of support. In the beginning, GitHub was a place for everything. Issues, questions, discussions, and multiple platforms were also there, like Spectrum, Stack Overflow, etc. To simplify and keep a history of the content generated on these platforms, we released the Strapi forum to manage the interactions with the community, trying to keep the GitHub only for issues. On the customer side, we reviewed the offer and processes to provide the best support possible with accurate content and respecting SLAs. On the community support, we can't scale internally the team as the community is growing. It's quite exponential. We have to remember that there is a financial equation that exists, and we are doing our best to provide the best support we can. That's also why we need the community itself implicated, involved in the support for the community. I really want to say thank you to community members that are really active and that are helping us a lot every day. I can roughly mention some of them, like Matti, Sunny, Abdon and Boaz. Customer satisfaction is one of our top priorities. We go above and beyond to make sure we truly understand every customer use case, constraints and requirements. From POC to development, from production to efficient content management at scale. We support hundreds of organizations at every step of their Strapi project. The learning, it's a pillar we are working on. The objective is to provide resources that will help you to level up quickly in your understanding of Strapi and all aspects of a project. We already launched the Strapi Academy, the first iteration of our certification program. Today, I'm happy to share that we have more than 3,600 students. There is also Strapi Recipes playlist on YouTube. A lot of video resources that help to understand concepts to achieve your deepest customization of Strapi. On behalf of the whole Strapi team, I want to thank all of you for writing tutorials, recording videos, answering questions on the forum and Slack. We are very grateful to be working with you, the Strapi community, on improving all the support and learning resources around the project. One of the most rewarding aspects of my job is getting to spend time with you, users, customers, and learning about the great things you are doing with Strapi. And during this conference, we are thrilled to have over 10 Strapi users and customers up on stage and share the Strapi journey with you. These are companies that all have different goals, challenges, and starting points. But what they have in common is that Strapi helped them accelerate their development process while giving their developers the freedom to use their favorite technologies. Today, I want to put the spotlight on two amazing Strapi customers. First is ICOM. ICOM has been using Strapi in production for more than 2 years now. We are thrilled to partner with ICOM to continue to support their journey to Headless CMS.
Hi, my name's Gareth Tissington. You can call me Tiz. I've been in web development since 1998, and yep, I'm aware that's a very long time. I'm currently the Associate Director of Global Digital Marketing for ACOM. I'm going to just recite the boilerplate here. We are the world's premier infrastructure consulting firm, and we employ nearly 50,000 people globally, and I wonder how many of you have actually heard of us. Oddly, my title internally in the business is still full stack developer, and you know what? I'm okay with that because that's exactly what I am and it's exactly what I love doing. When I first started to design websites, it was all tables and Perl scripts, and with some painstaking Photoshop image slicing, I made some good graphical sites that won some awards. I started delving into Flash to make things a little bit more graphical, and that was when I became reliant on XML. I started becoming very interested in back-end services from PHP that provided dynamic XML data to my Flash sites. By the way, I know Flash is universally hated, but I'll hold my hands up and say that I loved it. Absolutely loved it. ActionScript was great, and I still mourn its demise. Anyway, I'd become pretty fixated with what I guess we would now call a headless data approach. I started working with Node, Mongo and Backbone, and I found that working with enterprise APIs like SharePoint and WordPress were a real pain, as they were predefined and often quite poorly designed. I found that more often than not, if I hadn't developed the API myself, the work to get what I wanted out in a concise manner was often too much to maintain and scale at an enterprise application level. What I needed was something quick, secure, and easily consumable. The main problem was that designing those simple APIs took quite a bit of time, even though it was well worth it in the end. So, I moved to ACOM, I moved into marketing, something I hadn't really done for 20 years, but the same complexities remained. There wasn't a single point of truth for anything. I started using Angular and React, but I still needed data endpoints, and now I was dealing with Adobe and Salesforce. Still equally as bad in my opinion. I struggled on, and it was a struggle, until at the end of 2018 I came across something that really caught my eye. Strapi. I couldn't quite find the right project for it to start off with, but in early 2019 I was asked to make an app for some awards. I opted for a React PWA. I also decided on Strapi, as this was my big chance to use it in anger. Strapi was still in beta, but I had the system up and running locally in a day. I configured the rest to kick out everything I needed in one call in another 2 days. I'd never used Strapi before until this project, but I was flying. The front end was a breeze, and I had a functional application working in 7 days. The next opportunity to use Strapi came almost immediately after. I'd been asked by a client team to create a UX design that essentially converted an environmental impact assessment for a road that was planned to be upgraded near Stonehenge to a digital. It was a pretty big deal. EIAs are very long and complicated documents that are usually delivered in bound books that can contain thousands of pages. It had never been done before, the project would be very agile, it also contained potentially gigabytes of data. The one thing that was the easiest choice in the whole project was Strapi. We could rapidly change and develop the content types. Most importantly, we had a JSON content type that we could store geospatial information in a standardized format, GeoJSON. We could customize the API response so that we only got the data we needed in the right calls. The site had to be fast and there was a lot of information. So we created web workers to download the bulk of the info to the local cache in the background, whilst using the main thread to grab the info people were actually using in order to make the site, which actually after a lot of compression, contained only around 250 megabytes of data, seemed very responsive. As far as development was concerned, it was agile and we were delivering working versions of the site constantly to the client, so we could just clone Strapi at the touch of a button, branching the dev and the data so we could keep working on another version. I think this portability is one of my favourite things about Strapi. You have a data structure locked in, and just by copying the API folder to a new instance, cloning the MongoDB and copying the uploads, you're working on a new version instantly. The dev work we did on that project and the choice of Strapi as the data provider meant that we had the basis for a product in about 6 months, and it was a pretty complicated product. We had the server set up for my original awards app, and we pushed a blank Strapi structure to a Bitbucket repro and wrote a shell script that pulled the React front end and created a new digital EIA ready for data entry in minutes. The only thing we found during that project was that the amount of data and the relational content types, Strapi got complicated. It was overwhelming for a non-technical user, but actually we already had a solution. Strapi offered authenticated access controls, and whilst the API was open for read access, it was so easy to configure for the authenticated write access. User authentication was built into Strapi, so after a couple of weeks creating a front end, we actually had the basis of a front end spatial CMS. What we have now is a reusable Strapi instance and several flavours of Gatsby front ends. Both are ready on Bitbucket with default content and configs added in. We need the default content. As we now use Gatsby and GraphQL, I now have the problem of GraphQL needing a typed schema. And despite creating schema values for 90% of the content types in Gatsby, I still haven't got round to making the files work. If anyone has any thoughts on that, please let me know. We have a MongoDB that can be cloned from the server with our default content ready to go, and we now have a couple of front-end branches that perform different functions that are all connected to this one Strapi microsite boilerplate. Again, we have a shell script that creates, clones, installs and configures the Strapi and the Gatsby files on the server, and we have an Apache web server also on the same virtual server ready to serve the preview site. I originally went headless because I wanted an agnostic data source disconnected from the various front ends I might need, be those internally or externally facing, things like Power BI dashboards, intranet sites, even ingesting Markdown from Strapi into Adobe InDesign for project content, something I am investigating. The fact that Strapi has the ability to utilise both GraphQL and REST also granted me another one of my wishes. It meant that my data was easily accessible from anywhere. A lot of the content we produce in a company as big as ours has dual uses, both for client external marketing but also for staff awareness. Using REST along with GraphQL, I could have the best of both worlds. My intranet sites could pull campaign data from the Strapi site via secure REST, and I could use the GraphQL to provide an approved content I wanted for external use. This meant that even if my project hadn't been approved for external use, I could still host it in the same place and surface it for internal use. This had an unexpected benefit, as once my internal stakeholders saw the project listed for internal use only on our intranet, they quickly got the client approval needed for us to push it externally, which, as it was all in one place, was a real breeze. The more development I did, the more I realised that what I'd hit upon was the perfect approach for so many reasons. I loved React, after Flash and of course Strapi, it just made sense. But I had to consume APIs using REST, and this meant loading. And SSR React seems to be spoiling a little bit of the magic. However, for marketing sites, I needed amazing SEO and performance. And this is where another great feature of the fully headless and static site approach really shines for me. Now, I have security. By using Strapi and Gatsby as a static website builder, I now have SEO, I have performance, I have API accessibility, and now I have security. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but as a Fortune 500 company, we still use WordPress for our main website. And one of the biggest headaches with that is obviously security. By using this platform, I have a totally separate preview site on an Apache web server on the same server as my Strapi instance. Using the Strapi webhooks, users can build previews, clean the Gatsby instance, and publish the Gatsby instance to a very simple Azure app service. The app service is just a scalable web server, essentially a glorified CDN, nothing more. And once that's published and public facing, it's as secure as the sites I was building 26 years ago. There's no link back to my data, and republished new versions can happen in seconds. The final benefit from this approach is literally one that came to mind last week, and that's sustainability. The site I'm currently working on deals with AECOM's move to become a more sustainable and ethically responsible company, and it dawned on me that the approach that I've taken, and obviously my excellent dev skills that make the final published sites about as sustainable as a website could get. It's being served as HTML from a pretty dumb web server, the DB is only accessed on build, not every time someone visits the site, and my virtual dev server sleeps when it's not in use. I'll hold my hands up now and say that there's still a little bit of work to be done on reducing the bundle size, so this version probably isn't the most sustainable that it could be, but I am getting there. I think this approach is pretty much as close to perfect at the moment as it could be. But more importantly than anything, I don't have my single point of truth, and surely this is a cardinal sin for me if you've been listening. I'm about as miserable about that as I am with the fact that I still haven't moved the company website away from WordPress. But I am trying, and my first job is to transition our thought leadership platform away from WordPress. I remember the day in January 2020 when I had my global team all in London for a dev meeting about this massive task, and what a huge problem it would be to bring this platform and everything we wanted to do onto Strapi. We had some great dev diagrams, some big dreams, and then the shit hit the fan and there was a big global pandemic. But actually, the work I've been able to do in my little incremental versions of the microsite platform have made this task seem a lot less daunting. With the separate microsites I now have and the many different flavours of front ends I have all connected to a unified backend, pulling all this so it runs on one Strapi doesn't seem like an impossible task. In fact, it seems like quite an easy task. I know there'll be issues, but I'm not really that fazed by it. In the next 6 to 8 months, I'll be using Strapi as part of the main Acom web estate, and my grand plans of having all of our marketing collateral in one place will start to become reality. And best of all, that one place won't be WordPress. Cheers, Strapi.
Thanks, Gareth. And please giving your best reaction emoji on Discord for that amazing story. It's really exciting to see how a company like ICOM, a massive construction company, can build engaging digital experiences. The second story we thought you might be interested in is from MindGym. Both their mission and tech stack are truly inspiring. So today it's an honor for me to introduce you David Lush, CTO at MindGym, to tell you more.
Thank you for the introduction, Jim. Hello, everybody. My name is David Lush. I'm the CTO at MindGym. My background is as a distributed systems engineer. I've worked through Java, Python, done a little bit of Scala and JavaScript. I've been leading and managing technology teams for about 10 years' time. And today I've got an interesting talk around a little use case that's largely saved us from having to write any query APIs. I'm going to talk through what we do as a business, so what MindGym does, what we've built, and how what we've built works. First of all, we're MindGym. So I've been with MindGym for just over a year. I joined in April of last year. As a company, we've got about 20 years behavior change experience with some of the world's largest brands. It's people like Deliveroo, eBay, Uber, Cadbury's. We do about 40 million a year in revenue, so that's 40 million pounds. We've got high growth as well. So we've got about 300 employees across London, New York, and Singapore. And we work with a large network of external coaches as well. So traditionally, our business runs on coach-led sessions of 20 up to about 1,500 people. But recently, we've been building a new digital platform. So therefore, lots of interesting architectural decisions, lots of greenfield systems that we're building. This talk focuses on one specific set of problems that we're trying to solve. We need to serve well-structured content from our CMS. Our UI is very task-focused, so that our participants, our users, lots of small tasks. With what we're developing, we want to be able to look back in time at the actions that a user took, so something called a temporal query. And we don't really want to write lots of rigid REST APIs and maintain the source code that comes with that. So first of all, what have we built? The core of our platform makes use of event sourcing and CQRS. It's probably worth touching on that because not everybody's come across it in their working lives. So this gives us a separation of data flows in and out of the system. So every time a user interacts with a UI, it generates an event into our event API. Every time they click a button, scroll a page, this is written to an event log that's a ledger of every action that's ever occurred. And we also use some of these events to mutate state into a user-facing database. So in this instance, Postgres. So some examples of this could be a user has updated his or her password. That in turn mutates state and changes the password in the database. Probably a bit more of an interesting example would be someone's clicked a button at the end of a page, and this mutates state to say the user has finished an exercise and progressed on their learning journey, for example, with us. And then what are some of the impacts of a system like this in CQRS? It's a little bit more complex to work with than sort of simple CRUD, so create, read, update, delete. You need to deal with concerns such as event schemas and versioning, and eventual consistency as well. But there's some positive impacts as well. So read and write capacity can be scaled independent of one another because the inbound is a very separate path to the outbound. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, this allows for temporal queries. So I can look back at the state of somebody's learning journey all the way back through history. And as we develop more sophisticated analytics and build on it, we've still got all of our event history that we can look at with any future models. In terms of where Strapi fits in our system, we've also got some beautiful content in there. We looked at about 40 different CMSs before landing on Strapi. This included going to a short list of 5 and then doing proof of concepts with only 3 of them. So some of the key features that brought us into Strapi were the fact that it's a headless CMS, has a GraphQL API that we can access, gives single sign-on for our content authors. So in terms of like an active directory single sign-on, there is internationalization. I think just released into beta, if I'm stealing somebody's thunder. There are webhooks for new content, and it's open source and uses a very similar stack to the engineers that we've got in-house. The killer features for really though are around being able to define custom content types and define dynamic zones for our content authors. So we can put good guardrails around content, but still allow some freedom in certain areas inside of the content model. It also allows us to build a one-to-one relationship between our UI component library and our content schema. Leading on from this brings up a challenge. We've got 2 key data sources in this instance. We have our CQS restore, and we have the content that we've got in Strapi. We want to be able to access both from the UI. We need this to be secure. There's a few different options for how we can tackle this. We can write some APIs for the restore and access both the restore and Strapi separately. We could put a GraphQL server on the restore and again access them both separately. But it'd be nice if there's a tool that allows federated access, and we landed on Hasura as a nice open source tool that can give this consistent access. When we went down the Hasura route for a number of reasons as well. Here are the different options that we looked at. So we looked at putting an Apollo server on the back end. I think we are using an Apollo client in our front end as well. We considered Hasura and we considered Graphql. I'm not going to read out all of the bullet points that are on the page. There's some key call-outs that are worth mentioning for why we landed where we landed. So Hasura gave a really nice out-of-the-box experience with no real coding required. There's automatic schema inference from Postgres, automatic inference of relationships from primary and foreign key constraints in Postgres as well. And that remote schema concept allowed us to bridge our pre-existing Strapi GraphQL endpoint. One thing that's worth mentioning is we found the configuration a little bit painful, as it was all API calls rather than declarative and sort of config files at provisioning and deployment time. This could be that we've missed something or it's a new feature that's come out since. So if I move on into how does this all work a little bit for us. I'll start with something really simple. So this is Strapi content for us. This is how it looks in the browser. You've probably all done this a million times. If you want to look at the same, you'd be going to open the DevTools, open the Network tab, filter down to XHR. And for us, this comes up as GraphQL in that list, just because that's the name of the endpoint for us. In this instance, this is a content for a card that lives on our home screen. Again, nothing too special to call out. It's all quite standard. Very similar example. So again, this is in the DevTools and XHR. In this instance, we're retrieving data from our Postgres where the schema has been automatically inferred by Hasura for us. In this instance, it's allowing us to do things like get the user information and see when the user last logged in. So, for example, if the user's never logged in before, we can put them on an orientation journey and we can manage a smooth onboarding for them. So those 2 bits, quite simple, but showing that that retrieval of data in a federated manner from Strapi and CQRS out into the UI. There's a couple of nice extra features that we've been making use of. So one is in Hasura, there is configurable security. So you can call out to a webhook, or you can do a straight JWT configuration either as well. So we've no need for a call out. We've gone down the call out route. This webhook for us can only, so the lambda at the top can only be accessed from within our private network. We pass through request headers, including the token. We validate the token in the webhook, check a few other bits and pieces. And then as we come back, we pass in a few HTTP headers that are used by Hasura. So like a Hasura user ID and a Hasura role. But yeah, nice packaged up security, and again allows us to keep our approach consistent with where we do it elsewhere in the stack. And then finally, there's another nice little thing that the team has done. We've been using Code Generator or CodeGen to generate both TypeScript code and to generate Elm bindings, because we use a mixture of Vue and Elm in our front end. So on screen is a demo of GraphQL through to TypeScript. We use this at development time and commit the outputs into a repository. So for us, this is npm run types generate, and is defined in our package JSON. This queries the endpoint for us and generates the TypeScript using CodeGen. It means we get good type safety guarantees in our client code. And again, there's the Elm type safety, but that's a whole other presentation in itself. We're not yet at the point where we can quantify the benefits of the approach that we've taken, because we're quite a new team and we didn't have a lot of data from before we started working on this. But anecdotally, this combination of Strapi and Hasura has really accelerated us. It stopped us needing from having to write a whole bunch of back-end code that I would have done on previous projects. Hope you enjoyed a little window into our decisions over the past few months, and I'm happy to field any questions on Discord.
Thank you, David. Please give him a virtual high five on Discord for that amazing story. I think we are going to see more and more companies like MindGym using Hasura or Apollo Federation to provide a consistent federated graph interface. Okay, so we have one more special guest before we wrap up this keynote. Someone who is directly contributing in the innovation happening in the Jamstack ecosystem, with a bird's-eye view of the future of the modern web. Please join me in welcoming back on the stage Strapi CEO Pierre Burgy for a fireside chat with Vercel co-founder and CEO Guillermo Roche.
I'm pleased to introduce Guillermo Roche, creator of Next.js and co-founder and CEO of Vercel, to discuss the future of web development. Guillermo, thank you so much for being with us today. Could you give us a quick intro and story on how you ended up working on Next.js and starting Vercel?
Absolutely. I'm really glad to be here. So funny thing is, 4 years ago, I knew that I wanted to build and enable developers to build better websites and build a company around that. But when we're working on the website for the company, which at the time was called Zeit, it was really hard, believe it or not, to even build a page and publish it online that was taking advantage of all these innovations in the front-end world, like React components. React components came out of Facebook. They were really great for building widgets, like an autocompleter type widget, but it was really hard to build entire pages and applications with these innovative technologies. So even for that one page that I needed to publish online, which was our main website, which it was a startup at the time, just one page, it was really hard to get it started on two fronts. One, with a framework that made it really easy to generate pages and publish them online, and making them reliably, auto-scale, fast. But then that other piece of like the deployment platform, I wanted to just push and self-serve to all this incredible infrastructure that was all these innovations that were happening in the cloud. I didn't want to spend a year setting up a Kubernetes cluster, infrastructure, having to monitor it and so on. I was thinking more like this should work more like a CDN. So those two things led to the creation of Next.js and the Vercel platform. And the target developer was the front-end developer that was innovating on with these new tools, technologies, frameworks, and creating innovative experiences like on top of a headless CMS like Strapi.
Thanks a lot, and congrats on this amazing achievements. Next.js is now the fastest growing JavaScript front-end framework according to the 2020 JavaScript Rising Stars, with a recent $40 million Series B led by top VC. You've done pretty well for yourself, but in your mind, what has been your greatest accomplishment?
I think there's been a number of things that I'm really proud of that we've accomplished with our team. It's important to say that even though I did have influence over the initial ideas of Next.js, we hired a ton of people from our community. We worked a lot. Now people call it working in public. Because of the open source nature of our projects like Strapi and Next, I feel like we've always been working in public. So I think one of the things that I'm really proud of is having built a team that came from that open source community that care very deeply about these problems. We didn't just recruit engineers that were, I don't know, working on, backend or other kinds of things, Java developers. We're just working with our community and building this incredible project. And actually, I would say, like, more concretely, something that when I think about Next.js and I look back, one of the things that I'm proud of is that we stayed minimalistic. So we didn't add tons of stuff. We could have added, we could have turned it into like a full stack. We could have built a database we could have done so many things, but we chose to be very mindful of the surface of the problems that we're going to take on to have an opportunity to excel. And that's panned out really well for us because, for example, when we introduced Next.js 4 years ago, it was really focused on server rendering.
Yeah.
And then we realized, like, developers wanted to have the power to choose static or dynamic with great flexibility. And then we were actually able to add capabilities for that. I think about an alternative universe where, like, we would have bloated it with lots of APIs and lots of features, and we would have been able to respond to market needs and customers' needs as fast as we've been able to.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, hiring from the community is such an amazing thing to do, to build a team of passionate people, and being focused on what users want is definitely the way to build something that is extremely helpful for thousands of people. So, so I would like to talk a little bit about the CMS industry. So Headless is pretty much mainstream by now, with traditional CMSs trying to reposition and rebrand themselves as headless. In your opinion, why is the headless architecture paradigm becoming so popular? And where do you see it going next?
Yeah, I think with revolutionary technologies, what I find is that we can't just always pinpoint to a specific reason. And even reflecting on the success of Next, I always find myself, finding all these waves that were coinciding at the same time. So for Next and Vercel, the rise of front end, the rise of React, the rise of serverless architectures, like the rise of static dynamic hybrid architectures were all reasons for its success. And actually, I would even say the rise of decoupled architectures is a huge reason, because I mentioned earlier, I could have been tempted to bind Next to MySQL, right? Like, that's how WordPress works, is that you install it and there's an assumption it's bound to a specific database. With Next, because we knew that technologies like Headless CMS were rising, we said, you know what, we're not going to build that. We're going to really specialize on the front end side of things, work on performance, work on giving developers the best tools for really great web vitals and lighthouse scores and all these things, flexibility. I could even say more directly, the success of Next is because of the success of technologies like Strapi. Like, we didn't have to build that. Now, on your side of the world, you're not only empowering technologies like Next.js, but imagine that you go to a company that has hundreds of engineers, and I think one of the common technologies that is being built with Strapi and Next is a very popular, like, device manufacturer. And I could imagine this company, and I know, has hundreds of front-end initiatives, and they're serving multiple kinds of devices. They can't just lock themselves into a technology that is coupled, that says, okay, the CMS is coupled with the front end, even if it gives you a short-term advantage. Now, if you now have an API that serves content, you can serve your new Next.js initiative, your legacy PHP initiative, your iOS initiative, your Android initiative. So I think the rise of multi-device, I think the rise of front-end development more generally, and the fact that any given company has dozens, if not hundreds, of concurrent initiatives that could all be consuming data. You could even argue that the rise of microservices and the microservice thinking is what's also powering this headless CMS momentum. So I think it's, like you said, it's mainstream and it's here to stay.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned something that is really, really interesting, that maybe Next wouldn't be there without headless CMSs like Strapi.
Absolutely.
And the opposite is very true as well. I think this is why we believe so much, as mentioned previously in these keynotes. It's an entire ecosystem that is extremely exciting. It's growing really, really fast. And the good thing about this ecosystem is that we are all growing together. And that's
and we're sort of collaborating at a very large scale.
Yes.
Asynchronously, right? It's like the epitome of remote work. The Strapi team and the Next team are collaborating, but the binding glue is one data fetching hook that I mentioned. We took React and we added as little as we could to make it really useful to build websites. And one of the key things that my co-founder Naoyuki added was this data fetching hook, get initial props. And that hook is the one that has been able to connect our companies and connect our communities. Now it's been broken down into get static props and get server-side props. But the point has been that we're entering this new phase of, large-scale, flexible cooperation that, it's just fascinating. Like, we didn't know each other, but we were collaborating. And then we met each other in San Francisco one day. And now we work remotely together. It's been great.
Exactly. And so, with all of this microservices and jump stack architectures, they can sometimes lead to confusion or complexity if not thought out properly. What advice would you give to companies who are getting ready to migrate from traditional to a more modern API-first tech stack?
Yeah, that's a great point. I spend a lot of time thinking about this, right? Because coupling has these short-term advantages.
Yeah.
You get up to speed. It feels like you get up to speed more quickly, and I think that vertical integration has benefits. I think the biggest piece of advice I would give is embrace the API. Right? The Supreme Court just ruled in the U.S. that you can't copyright APIs. So I think it's a good time to say, like, embrace the API, embrace the openness of APIs. And APIs are getting easier all the time, right? Like with REST, with GraphQL, with TypeScript-based auto-completion of the clients. I think we're working to the point where it's going to be the Sun Microsystems sort of motto of the network is the computer is becoming more true every day, that it feels like these things are coupled. So I think you can take that leap of faith into this world of decoupled, because paradoxically, every day that passes, we're integrating our technologies better, and they feel like they're coupled, but they're retaining all these benefits of decoupling.
Exactly. And APIs allow all of the things to connect things together. And I'm very curious, from conversations you can have with your prospect and customers that are moving to Next.js or Vercel, and from your discussion with your peers in that industry, what are the main benefits and opportunities for companies who embrace this modern approach to app development?
Yeah, I think the number one is delighting end users. I think really, like, as an industry that is building on top of web, our number one opportunity really is that you create better experiences for your users. So if you're in e-commerce and you're betting on Strapi, Next.js, and Vercel to render your content pages, literally what you're doing is you're giving your customers a better brand experience that is custom to you and that is authentic. You're giving them better performance. Better performance leads to better conversion for e-commerce, but it also leads to better SEO. So at the end of the day, my sort of design goal, my North Star has been, whatever it is that we do, we're building a better product for end users. And the other thing, I think that there are two other sort of important things that follow and go very close with that. One is developer experience.
Yeah.
My recommendation to most companies in the world as they make a transition toward digital would be bet on developer empowerment. Don't try to postpone it for the next century. Like, oh, one day I'll become a tech company. I think it's embracing the fact that you can buy great tools for your developers, best of breed tools for each category, the best CMS, the best framework, the best platform. And ultimately that if developers are happy, then it becomes like this virtuous cycle of users are happy, developers are happy, and just, you bring new products to market, new initiatives, new campaigns. And we saw that really well. I mean, you mentioned our Series B financing. Throughout 2020, a lot of companies were forced to go digital really fast. And that's where it was great validation of our work, in that, companies that needed to adapt their business model to COVID were able to do that in record time on top of our platforms.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And this is the exact same benefits with the former CMS point of view. And as you know, the Jamstack industry is quite fragmented with many CMS players, JavaScript frameworks, static website generators, e-commerce solutions. What do you see as the main areas of collaboration and differentiation in this ecosystem?
I would say, while it's really fragmented, I would say relative to how fragmented it's going to be in the next 10 years in terms of like the explosion of services that you're going to be able to choose from, we're at the very forefront. So we're seeing every day, everything is being API-fied. It's almost like we opened the Pandora box, and now every day it seems like I'm finding a new exciting API that I can use as a front-end developer to make my product better. So I think embracing that is just going to be like kind of the key thing for the decade. I think the approach to how we build these pages is continuing to evolve. It's going to be a combination of static, dynamic, on-demand rendering, edge rendering. We're putting computation everywhere in the world. No. And sometimes, one of the core tenets of Jamstack, which is the J, which is putting a lot of JavaScript in the client, I'm not so sure that that's going to stay the case. I think putting a lot of burden on the device, especially in growing emerging markets, it might be too much of a burden, and we're going to move that more and more to the cloud. I think that's been one of the big things that we learned with Next, is companies sometimes start static, like we can call that like pure Jamstack, and then grow into more and more dynamic workloads and use the cloud computational power more and more. So I think we're going to continue to see an explosion in like the tools that we have as developers to build these pages, not only on the framework level, but how that framework literally does the rendering, how it performs the computation, how it delivers the content to end users. And finally, the biggest trend that I'm seeing as well is personalization, geo-based personalization, basically user-based personalization. What are the pieces of content, speaking of CMS, what are the pieces of content I can recommend to you today at this very time in Paris? We're going to continue to see more and more tools to bring the content to the user as most relevant.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Everything will be about fragmented ecosystem that will be all connected together. And I do believe as well that we will see more and more this hybrid approach between JavaScript front-end, like server-side rendering, and static website generators. I will see something more hybrid. And as for the customized experiences, this is really something we want to invest in as a CMS, to display different content according to some parameters.
Absolutely. Content targeting, I think, is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And there are already a number of Strapi templates and starters for Next.js. What could the Strapi and Vercel teams and communities do to improve the integration points between the two frameworks, and where should they go to continue the conversation?
I think the biggest thing that I see there is non-technical teams want to be enabled to feel like they're directly manipulating the content. If I go to strapi.io and vercel.com, it's like, you know what? Like, I want to replace the heading. I'm done with this headline. I have a new idea. I think have to work on an integration such that we continue to bring down the friction that it takes for anyone to propose, preview, and ship such a change. And I think the technology is already all there, because this has been possible in other ecosystems that are not, let's say, as future-proof, right? Like if I use the likes of like Wix, Squarespace, and all that, I get the direct manipulation, I get the access. It feels like it's a little bit easier and just right there. But obviously I don't get the future-proof, I don't get the developer empowerment, I don't get all these great benefits. But I think these two worlds are going to collide. I think with technologies like incremental static regeneration in Next.js and Vercel, you can preview content and then you can dynamically push it and get that, real-time content editing experience without having to wait for a full rebuild. So technology is already there. Now what we're missing is facilitating the UIs to make this really seamless. If I'm a non-technical user, I can just press edit, whether it's a drawer or a sidebar that comes in and start editing the content, propose it as a change, preview it, share hyperlink, ship it. That has to be brought down to like 30 seconds. And I think for a lot of setups, a lot of proficient users of our technology is already there. Like a lot of people are probably listening to this and like, I already have that. But just democratizing access to everybody in the world that wants to use the Strapi and Next.js, it should be a matter of seconds.
Exactly. And all of these headless API first approaches added a lot of complexity. So it can be a bit harder for content editors to preview what they update in the CMS. And as you mentioned, the technologies are already there. So I think it's just
it's exciting
integrations. And I can't wait to make more integrations in the future on all of the things. I have one question for you. So you've been following the development of Strapi for some time now and already had a bit of visibility on what we just announced. What do you see as Strapi's key strengths and opportunities for the future?
Easy. Open source, I think. Like Strapi's ethos has been to build in an open manner. I think that's an ethos that a lot of companies are still like eager to adopt, right? Like we're still finding lots of customers that are in like legacy proprietary stacks that feel locked in, that feel like they can't manipulate and understand the software in a deep way. So I think that continues to be the number one strength that I see in this shared ecosystem, because Vercel is a business and there's a Strapi company, but we're building in the open. So it's like Brendan Eich always says, like, always bet on JavaScript. I think always bet on open source is pretty much a no-brainer.
I'm glad we are very well aligned on this vision and passion for open source. Well, thank you so much for your insight, Guillermo. It was extremely interesting.
Awesome to be here.
All right, it's time for us to wrap up this keynote. Friendly reminder to share your feedback, questions, and favorite moments on Twitter with the StrapiConf hashtag. If you haven't already, join us on Discord for a live Q&A, sponsor booth, and giveaways. Once again, thank you so much for being part of this journey. Enjoy the rest of the conference.